Hello friends, it is I, man who is running out of different things to call himself in every video, and I'm bringing you a video on behalf of Dota Alchemy. In fact, not DotaAlchemy.com, as I mentioned in the previous video. It's patreon.com/Dota Alchemy, and the reason that I keep shouting it out and shilling myself is because Donnie went to a business convention and they told him we need to do that. But in any case, this video is on the 3 best offlaners in 7.20, and without further ado, let's get into it. Number 3, Dazzle. Chances are Dazzle has been an effective offlaner for quite some time, but he's just been played so much in the 5 role in the past that nobody was really super willing to take a serious shot at trying a Dazzle offlane until he got buffed to the point where he looked to be a really strong core to everybody. The reason that I think he was probably a good offlaner for quite some time is just because ever since his Q got changed to refresh on right clicks, Dazzle became an incredibly strong laner. And one of the most important aspects of a strong offlaner, at least in the meta for the last year or so, is the ability to pressure the lane extremely hard. I think prior to this change, Dazzle was probably a good mid-game offlaner, just because his skills and talents offer a lot of utility, lane push, and semi-carry potential, which is exactly what you want in an offlaner. But the issue is you would get crushed so hard in the lane that you wouldn't really have a game. You wouldn't really get to the point where you can do all of those things. Imagine an Underlord or a Tidehunter without a strong lane. These heroes, they essentially become a support, even though they have utility. If they die like 4 or 5 times in the lane, they just look really useless, which is not ideal. Dazzle obviously is the same, except he used to be a much worse laner, and this is obviously not the case anymore with the Q getting changed. Once 7.20 hit, Dazzle's ultimate was replaced by Bad Juju, and it became very clear that he was going to be a super strong core, just because his ultimate now gives cooldown reduction, which of course is amazing with Dazzle's abilities, but even better with some of the items that you can get in the game. The problem with Dazzle's support is that the absurdly broken amount of cooldown reduction that you get from the ultimate is wasted because you aren't able to farm items quick enough to have their cooldowns reduced and be useful. Some popular items on core Dazzle now, for example, are Necronomicon, because once you're level 12, it essentially has a 100% uptime. Midas, because the cooldown reduction means you get a lot of gold from it and experience, more than other heroes. And some typical offlane items like Pipe, Crimson Guard, and so forth, just because reducing the cooldown on these items means that you can take fights far more frequently, and these are items that traditionally Dazzle would love to build. Necronomicon in particular is the go-to first item on most core Dazzles and even some support Dazzles, just because it speeds up your farm tremendously. You can use it to push lanes, you can use it to heal bomb, you can use it to proc your Q because it does the right clicks. You're basically also a walking gem once you get the Necro 3. Like, this item is absurdly strong on Dazzle. In the subsequent patches after 7.20, Dazzle has been nerfed, just because he's ubiquitously considered to be top 3 heroes in Dota. And as a result, I think Dazzle has slowly moved more and more into the offlane role because he's got increased mana cost on his spells, which means that he needs some regen and items to sustain them. And his spells have been nerfed in the early levels, but not in the later ones, which means that Dazzle is going to be better in a role that gets items and gets gold for regen, but then also get some experience, because you're just the same hero if you get some experience. So essentially, he is a very good offlaner, but I still think he's really strong in the other roles just by virtue of being an incredibly strong hero. But I think the offlane role is just perfect for Dazzle. Number 2, Beastmaster. One of the biggest problems that is plaguing the offlane right now is the fact that the easy camp is very hard to block. The reason for this is because the enemy support just needs to purchase one single sentry ward, and they can deward the entire easy camp plus the surrounding area where there's probably going to be other wards, just due to the sentry vision being so large in 7.20. So with the easy camp basically always available, it means that the safe lane can do a single pull every minute, causing a double wave to be thrown into the enemy offlane, which makes it incredibly hard to pressure the the safe lane, due to the massive creep wave that will be created, and it also allows the carry to get farm in otherwise impossible lanes, and that is not good if you're an offlaner. That is, the safe lane has a lot more options for winning the lane due to the sentry change. Beastmaster, however, completely throws a wrench into this problem just because he can simply spawn a hawk every minute and put it into an unreachable location in that easy camp that is going to block the camp. This means that if you pick Beastmaster, you can save a ward, and you can completely avoid one of the bigger problems that is plaguing the offlane right now just by virtue of having the hero on your team. This alone makes him an incredibly desirable pick because laning is so important. Changes to the map in 7.20 have also made the Hawk extremely valuable. In particular, the fact that there are high grounds everywhere in Dota makes it that any form of high ground / flying vision is going to be extremely strong for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's very dangerous to walk up or play near high grounds, which offlaners love to do. They love to just play in the lane, and after you take the tier 1, and the tier 2 is exactly where the high grounds are now because they're on the jungles. So essentially, most offlaners can't effectively split push now because of those high grounds, but Beastmaster, he can just put a Hawk on the high ground, on the shrine, and you can split push and play near that high ground / tier 2 area that other offlaners simply cannot. And this is one of the best play styles for most offlaners, is just sit in a lane, pressure, force the enemy team to come to you, and make a lot of space. With that being said, it's not like Beastmaster is a slouch in team fights either, which is the other half of Dota. In fact, vision is one of the most important things in fights. And now that the Hawk is invisible, you can just summon a Hawk the moment a fight starts, and you can get vision, which is going to give you a much better chance of winning the fight because you can see the heroes that you need to see. You can see the backline. If there's like a Dazzle or Oracle, you can get on top of them. In fact, this is something that Vici, the original Vici, they kind of made this a very popular thing that all tier 1 teams do now, where they'll hold a ward, they'll place it the moment a fight starts, just so that way they can get to the backlines, they can get vision for the fight, and you lose the ward vision, but you get the ward vision for during the fight. And now you can do that with Beastmaster with just the Hawk, and if you're fighting around a high ground, you can use the Hawk to scout up the high ground and fight. So essentially, Beastmaster is good at both split pushing, which is very hard to do with most offlaners now, and team fighting, which is just insane. The final reason that Beastmaster is considered to be incredibly strong right now is because the boar is way better than it was in the previous patches. It has 250 more HP, makes it a lot harder to kill, 24 more damage than it had before, and most importantly, it now does hero damage instead of piercing. This means that the boar does far more damage to heroes and towers than it did before, and effectively the same damage that it did to creeps, because creeps have lower armor anyway, so who cares? So now the boar is essentially a lot better to be used for harassing your opponents, for fighting, and for pushing lanes and towers, because it does more damage to towers, because piercing damage did basically nothing to towers. So essentially, Beastmaster is just way better with the summons. Number 1, Centaur. Speaking of heroes that were already incredibly strong, Centaur is arguably better in this patch than he was in the previous one, and that's saying a lot because he was first pick, first ban material by every team in the tournament directly before 7.20. What makes Centaur strong is firstly, of course, what made him strong in the previous patch, which is the fact that he's your typical strong laning, stunning offlaner that also has this ultimate that functions as arguably the best team-wide disengage in all of Dota. But in 7.20, he got a rework on basically what were the bland, not super useful abilities, which was Double Edge and Return. Return was replaced with Retaliate, which effectively does the same thing. Plus, once you build up enough stacks, which come from getting right-clicked by heroes and towers, you can essentially use the ability to give you a percentage damage increase based on your base damage and the number of stacks of Retaliate that you had from those right-clicks. In other words, every single time your opponent hits you, they're giving you an immense amount of eventual damage bonus. This skill is particularly strong in the laning stage, where if you max Retaliate, you can have rapier levels of damage at level 7. This is very convenient for Centaur because he is able to both get on top of you and stun you for a long duration. Most heroes have either damage or setup and stun. Not both usually, except for Centaur. He's one of the exceptions. The Double Edge rework is also much better for Centaur than it was in the previous patch. And you might be thinking, but Jenkins, it does less damage now. That surely must be a nerf. But it really isn't, because Double Edge, it does the damage to Centaur himself. So reducing the damage does kind of nerf and buff it at the same time. But more importantly, what was a direct buff to Double Edge is the fact that the cast time has been reduced on it. Now, it's so quick that you can get off a Double Edge and essentially get one extra right-click during your Centaur stomp. And also, you can't juke Centaur anymore in the trees. A lot of the time, somebody would get kind of low HP, they'd run into the trees, they'd get away by using some mobility ability, and the issue is just Double Edge was such a long windup that it felt pretty clunky, and now it doesn't. So Double Edge, it also scales with strength now, and it has a talent to amplify it. So in the late game, it actually does more damage than it did before. So as a result of all of these things, Centaur is probably the best offlaner right now, which is no surprise, because I don't think the nerfs to him were enough, and he was possibly the best hero in the previous patch. So that's it for this video, guys. I do want to make some honorable mentions. Axe and Magnus are two heroes that I think are incredibly strong, but they're being played a lot as supports right now, and also they've been nerfed a lot, and they're kind of falling off a little bit. I'm still seeing where those heroes go in the future patches, but in any case, these new heroes, these new top 3, they seem a little bit better. Doesn't make Axe and Magnus any worse. I think Venge is really strong. I'm personally very confident about Venge, but this is more of a conjecture rather than a hero that's guaranteed to be a strong offlaner, just because it's not getting picked all that much. It's not picked quite enough in competitive for me to say that it's for sure one of the best offlaners. It's just an offlaner that I personally think is very underrated. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for listening to those honorable mentions. Check out patreon.com/DotaAlchemy. I'll see you guys in the next video.